Hello and welcome to episode or webinar number 32, I believe. Today we're going to talk about managing expectations during this quarantine. I have added quite a few people to my Facebook group, Powerful Parenting for Today's Kids. I invite you to check it out. And they have brought up some topics that they are struggling with. And so I thought these would be a great opportunity to, discuss some of these challenges to help all of you, because if one of you are having a hard time with it, many of you are having a hard time with it. What are you doing, Faith? Oh, here. She's coming to get her schoolwork. So anyway, yes, managing expectations. So I've been speaking to a few parents whose expectations may be a little higher during this quarantine than is helpful for them or their children. I think that, we're all weeks into this quarantine at this point. I know I here am in week number 6, or we are in week number 6. And I think this is where really the rubber is meeting the road, and where people are beginning to fork a little bit. And let me explain. Those of us who have developed a routine and a flow to our days are finding these times a bit easier. Those of us who have not developed a flow and a routine to our days are finding this time a little more challenging. Those of us who have been mindful of what our expectations are not struggling, do not seem to be struggling as much as those of us who still have unrealistic expectations for themselves and their kids. That's been my experience from the parents I've been coaching through this pandemic, and the people I've been speaking to, my friends, my colleagues, other parents. I think expectations are an important topic to discuss in parenting in general, and even more so during this time of quarantine. When our schedules are disrupted, our lives are turned upside down, the world as we know it ceases to exist, and everything is in chaos and disarray. That is not the time to have high expectations for yourself or your child, because it's hard enough just to figure out how to survive this time. It's hard enough to figure out how to get through intact, to not be riddled with anxiety, to not be traumatized by this experience. We have enough on us, facing us, to try to figure out a new normal, to figure out what each day looks like when we can't wake up and go to school, and we can't wake up and go to work, and we can't wake up and go to the gym, and we have to wear a mask to go to the grocery store, and we have stay-at-home orders. It's hard enough to get used to what in the world that even is, because it's so foreign to so many of us. To have expectations that our kids will get good grades or as good of grades as they were getting, or that they will not have a temper tantrum, or that they will clean their room when they're asked, or that they won't talk back to us. To expect those things, I think, is really unreasonable. We're all being asked to do something that's unfamiliar, feels unfair, feels unreasonable. And we have to give some space to ourselves and to our kids to be able to make those adjustments that we need to make in order to keep ourselves intact during this time. It's also not fair to have unrealistic expectations for ourselves, right? So if we normally are calm and centered and grounded, and right now we're feeling stressed or anxious or tired or grouchy or miserable or frustrated, all of those things are normal. All of those things are completely understandable. But I meet so many parents who are so hard on themselves. They're so they're their own worst enemies, their own worst critics. They're so judgmental of themselves. They have expectations of themselves that are unreasonable. And when I ask these parents, would you expect your dear friend to behave or feel the way you expect yourself to feel? And they say, no, of course not. Would you speak to your friend the way your inner voice is speaking to you? Would you be so unkind? Would you be so unforgiving? No. So what I encourage parents to do is to treat themselves the way they would treat their closest, dearest friend. Treat themselves and talk to themselves the way they would if their closest friend was struggling and needed help. That's how we need to treat ourselves. If we had a good friend who was struggling and needed help, we would not berate them. We would not judge them. We would not yell at them. We would not say nasty, unkind things to them. But so many of us do it to ourselves. So many of us. I've spoken to parents who explain to me, who have articulated to me what their inner voices say. How could you be so stupid? You're such a loser. Every time you try to accomplish something, you always fail. You never see anything through to its conclusion. You always set goals and you don't meet them. These are horrible things, mean, hurtful things that we say to ourselves that we would never, ever say to another person. Why are we saying it to ourselves? One thing I tell my kids all the time is that we should be our own best friends. My daughter asks me all the time, Mom, who's your favorite person in the world? And without skipping a beat, I say, myself. And that doesn't mean I don't love my husband and love my kids dearly. They are everything to me. But no one takes the place of me. I am my own best friend. I am my own favorite person. I love myself more than anyone. If I don't treat myself like that, how can I possibly treat anyone else that way? If I don't know how to give myself the love and the care and the honor and respect that I deserve just because I'm alive on this planet, how will I know how to give that to anyone else? And how will I model that to my own kids for how to love themselves and how to be kind to themselves and how to respect themselves. I have to do it with me first. And so do all of you. You have to be your own best friend. You have to treat yourself with love and kindness. And during this time, it's helpful to lower your expectations of yourself. If you don't lower your expectations of yourself and give yourself the grace and compassion that you deserve, how can you possibly do it with your kids? How can you give them the grace and the compassion and the understanding to get through this difficult time, to be grouchy sometimes when they're feeling grouchy, to be discouraged, to feel like the world is never going to be any better? How can you give them the space to feel all of those things? How can you give them the space to not be as motivated to do online schooling as they may have been in their school building? How can you give them the space and the space and the grace to to mess up when they're trying to manage due dates for their classwork and requirements that are all shifting and new in this time? How can you give them that if you don't give it to yourself first? And if you give it to them, when you lower your expectations and you give them that space and that understanding and that compassion and grace to mess up and to struggle and to not be sure and to feel like it's all unfair and to be annoyed with the whole thing, then you also can give them the support that they need and the encouragement to find ways to get through this time, to find ways to triumph during this unprecedented time. But you won't be able to make that connection and get them to connect to them on a level that they will hear you or appreciate what you're saying or be able to receive what you're saying until you first connect with them and hold space for them and give compassion to them. And if your expectations are so high, you won't have the frustration tolerance to be able to hold that space for them. And then that devolves into arguing, fights, power struggles, disappointment, disconnection. There's never been a better opportunity and never been a more important time to connect to your kids and to yourself. That is vitally important right now to get through this time intact, whole, and with the least amount of trauma possible. But we can only do that when we lower our expectations on ourselves and our kids. Lowering our expectations doesn't mean that we condone their grades dropping like a stone. It doesn't mean that we're celebrating the fact that they forget to turn in their work on time. It doesn't mean that we're telling them it's okay to snap back at us and to speak to us with disrespect. But what it is saying is, I understand. This is a hard time for me, and it's a hard time for you, and it's a hard time for everyone. Let's be a little more gentle with each other. I understand if you snapped at me just now. I understand you're struggling, and I want to try to help you so that you can get through this time better. Rather than, how dare you speak to me like that? I will not be spoken to like that. I deserve respect and you will give it. How's that getting us closer together? How's that getting us closer to resolving the disrespect and the snapping back? It's not. So that's what I wanted to share with you today on this Monday, what is it, April 20th? And I hope that this helps you to have a little better understanding of expectations and what is best for you to do especially during this pandemic, and how you can adjust your expectations to make this time more survivable, more productive, and more connecting for you and your kids. I would love to hear any comments you have. You can comment below the video in the Facebook group, or you can send me an email. I would love to connect with you. All right, that does it for today's episode. I will see you here same time tomorrow.